Well, Jacqui and John are joining us now. We're excited to have them. I will just knock out some of the quick and important details that you all are going to need to know, because most of you are at various places in the application process for this Doctor of Ministry in Public Theology, kind of across the board. Some of you are just starting the application. Some of you have finished and you're just waiting to get a decision. Some of you have just got one more transcript to get in. So let me just start by saying I'm going to be your most important resource when it comes to application things. This is kind of a gift opportunity that we have to hear from Jacqui and John and Terry about the program and about how they're going to teach it and what the experience will be. But I am your best resource when it comes to questions about boring things like transcripts, things like letters of recommendation, how to just get started in this whole process. So I just put in the chat menu there my email address. I'm putting that because I want to make sure this is a space where you get to really talk about the ins and outs of the experience with Jacqui, John, and Terry. But I want you to follow up with me. If you're even right when you get off, I'm still going to be here on email. If you're running into any issues with your application, if you want me to read over your personal statement, if you have any kind of questions like that, just shoot me an email right away so that we can get you to that next stage, because we're hoping to see applications finished up by March 1st. We do have some flexibility with that date going into March, but we really do want to kind of have our cohort and numbers figured out by that time. So we do have some students that have already started with Jacqui and John doing some individual kind of mentoring groups and conversations like that. So it's going to be a really robust and wonderful group of folks doing this DMin in public theology. But I want to make sure that all those kinds of important questions get to me. So overall, the other important details you should just have is that this will be a 5-semester, 30-credit program. So you're generally doing about 2-3 credit courses at a time. But within that kind of 5-year mark, so about 2.5 years is the length of what you would be doing with Drew. Some of that would be a little more self-directed in terms of some projects you're going to do and some research that you may be doing on your own. But the rest of it would be one-on-one time of mentoring with your faculty professors, some in-class sessions at Drew or in New York City, as well as some online components. So that's kind of the broad overview. That's some of the boring stuff I wanted to set the stage for. And I think really we should just get into it with Jacqui and John and Terry and have them talk a bit maybe about how do you think about public theology in terms of how would you define what the task of public theology is in our current context? And maybe let's think about, for some of us maybe that came into Christian ministry through a traditional ordination path, how is that call shifted when you consider yourself a public theologian in some sense?
Hey, Jacqui and John, good to see you. Good to see everyone. I'm Terry Todd. I'm part of this teaching team, and so Jacqui, John, do you want to take a first stab at Scott's question?
Ready?
No, I think you should go first, John.
Oh.
Hi, Terry. It's good to see you.
Yes, wonderful. So welcome, everyone. It's great to have you with us. I see a few faces, which is great. And those of you who are on audio, welcome. We're glad to have you in the conversation. I think part of what we're after here is to explore together this question. But let me start with sort of an entry point frame for this. A public theology is a theological frame that is focused in the world around us. It's looking at how theology connects with the contemporary world. It looks at how it connects with issues confronting the world around us, locally, nationally, and globally. How do we think about our role, our prophetic role in these settings? How do we build alliances? How do we build partnerships? How do we find ways to link up with others to create a stronger voice in the public square? I should probably say at the outset, if you haven't already picked this up, that I at least am coming from a more theologically progressive perspective. So I want to put that out at this point in the game so that you know that I will be talking from that perspective. We're going to do a lot of reading together around these issues. I'm excited for the structured conversations we're going to have and the way in which we're hoping this will be an experiential learning track together. So let me stop there and see if others want to chime in, Terry or Jacqui.
Hi, everybody. Jacqui Lewis here. So glad to see you. I would say Jesus was a public theologian. And I know that we might have some different folks from different traditions. We hope we will join the cohort. That's awesome. But all the traditions I know believe at least Jesus was a prophet, or understand that he was a rabbi, a historical person in Yeshua ben Joseph that was an itinerant teacher. And that guy is my mentor, and that guy was a public theologian. Meaning he wasn't just sitting around the table with the 12 disciples kind of having talks about God. It was, how do I engage my culture? How do I engage my neighborhood? And his particular public theological frame was cultivated in the context of empire. You know, a boy raised in Nazareth, which is in Palestine, ancient Palestine, whose parents traveled to Bethlehem to register themselves to find themselves giving birth in a stable, who found themselves protecting their little boy by taking him to Egypt and hiding out when there was a big infanticide. That shaped his life, to grow up with that backstory as a child, and then to find himself back in Galilee, ancient Palestine, teaching, preaching, healing. Mark's gospel really lays out that this was Jesus's mission, to preach and teach and heal, and therefore bring about the reign of God. So this is not a new thing to be thinking about public theology. And whether our perspective is progressive or conservative or liberal or whatever, neoliberal, whatever it is that we would call ourselves, most of us are doing our faith in more public ways than we might own. And I think this class, this cohort, this D-Min is about getting us self-conscious about what it means to be a theologian in the public square. When you preach a sermon and you're not the only one in the room, you're in the public square. When you do a Bible study and there's 12 people around the table, you're in the public square. Because everything you say goes back out with you into the public. If you write an op-ed, you're in the public square. If you happen to be doing an interfaith breakfast and you get to say the invocation, you're in the public square. How will we use those public spaces? How will we make a connection between our personal, I would say, theology and the public square? In other words, how we make a connection between our personal faith and our desire to build the reign of God, the something, the shalom, the peace, whatever that is that's in our mind that is a recovered or tikkun olam, a healed world. How do we do that? I think we have to get self-conscious about what we believe, and we get self-conscious about what we say, and we get self-conscious about who we bring along with us. And I don't know, I would say boldly, too much of the church has let other folks hijack the story of God's incredible love in the world. And how can we get it back and just talk about love and justice and peace and shalom? So this is what we're going to do. And we're going to try to do some work around your private stuff and also help you to cultivate a rigorous theology that matches what you dream about in the world. And how will we put that out there in the way we preach, teach, write, counsel folks, every space in which we are not alone is a public theological space, and we want to be able to be effective in that space. What about you, Terry?
Well, you probably didn't hear me shouting amen while you both were speaking, because my microphone was off there. But I wanted to shout amen because just to think of Jesus, our leader, our guru, our Lord, our Savior, as a public theologian is I think a brilliant way to think about what we're trying to do in this program. And I'll tell the story that You know, I've been teaching in Doctor of Ministry program at Drew for a very long time. And often I see students come with a question, and that is, how do I get young people into my church? That's a question that recurs again and again. And I'm wondering, I always ask, is that the right question? Or is there a way that we can turn the question and ask it another way? Because I think it's really crucial for the Christian church not to ask, how do we get people inside, but how do we get us outside and build the bridges between outside and inside? That's how I understand public theology, that it is, and I think truly, all good theology is public theology because it has public consequences. It has consequences for the common good. And at this particular junction in time, I think it's really crucial for us to think about public theology, how to build those bridges between church and between outside world. It's a way of rethinking ecclesiology, a way of rethinking what church is, where church is, and how to be church in different kinds of ways. And that goes to the heart. We can talk more about this. One aspect of this public theology Doctor of Ministry program is a way of understanding how we bring the church outside into public spheres, how to gather, how to be witness in those public spheres, how to do our art and our liturgy and our rituals in those public spheres, and then to bring the energy back into the churches with us. So that's one aspect of this program. And I'll stop there because I'm sure that you have, that all of you on this call have questions for Jacqui, for John, or for me. So
please. I have a really funny story as we shake folks. At least it's funny to me. So I got my MDiv at Princeton Theological Seminary in '92. Holy cow, that was a long time ago. But I remember Dick, I can't do his name. One of my favorite professors was teaching the evangelism class. And I was like, I am not taking an evangelism class. Like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to take it. Why? Because I just was scarred by tracts and, you know, Campus Crusade for Christ things and all the, I was like, oh, it just doesn't feel like what I'm called to do. And I remember he said to me, evangelism means, sharing the good news by any means necessary. And he was certainly not a kind of a Malcolm X guy, but that stayed with me all these years. And so this D-Min is about getting the good news of the love of God out in the world by any means necessary. And to feel as though we have good news to share, says the girl who didn't want to take the class.
Amen.
I appreciate that context a lot. I think as a fellow born-againer who came from a side of Christianity where I think was presented evangelism in a sense that was a shallow version of it, that didn't seem to have a commitment to social holiness, that didn't seem to have even a commitment to my neighborhood outside of the walls of the community I was raised in. So I think this is actually a really helpful way to think about what are we doing with public theology? How is it not separate from some of the ways the church has already tried to talk about its purpose, but it's actually a more robust version of it. For those that are kind of new to Drew, I want to say that you maybe run into Jacqui Lewis through her leadership at Middle Church as the senior pastor there. John Janka involved, whether it's at Middle Church or the Middle Project as well. This may be one of your first encounters with Dr. Todd, with Terry Todd, who you just got to hear from wonderfully. I just want to give some context that what he brings to the table is not just a direct connection to the full-time faculty at Drew, but he's an American religious historian that has done a lot of work on, when I took classes from you, you called it the recent past, which I always found really helpful. So when Jacqui was saying, you know, public theology, this is a term that maybe we're hearing more now, but it's not a new idea. I would just be interested, Terry, if you could just speak to what your sense is of this when you're thinking about folks inside the church going outside. Would you agree that's not a new idea, and this is actually something that has shown up through your studying of American Christianity for a long time?
Well, I think it's not a new idea at all. I think even, you know, I think, Jacqui, you said it. I mean, Jesus was a public theologian, and there have been public theologians in every era of the history of Christianity, right? I'm thinking of the mendicant friars who left monasteries and who wandered with a bell and a book, who teaching about the love of Christ and its effects in the world. Whenever people think about and talk about and act for the common good, right? That's what we mean when we say public theology. When we talk about Christian love, we're talking about the flourishing of all people, right? And not just Christians, but the flourishing of all people. So, so we want in this program to not only think about public theology as an idea, but to think of public theology as a spiritual practice. And in doing so, Scott, we stand on the shoulders of many, many generations of Christians who've struggled and worked for the public good in every generation. So we stand on their shoulders, and there's a way in which this particular historical moment, the era that we share, the era in which we are alive, demands certain ways of social and theological analysis, contextual analysis, both of our ministry context and how our ministry contexts are situated in larger contexts that are, come on, I think we might agree, this is an exceedingly dangerous moment in the United States and really throughout the world, with the rise of nationalism and with the continuation of racist ideologies. We need to rely on each other, right, to ask again what Christians in every age have asked: what is the common good? How can we act toward and with the common good? How, where do we stand ethically, and how do we stand? And how do we think together about new and innovative ways to bring, Jacqui, I'm thinking about your evangelism question. How do we think of new and innovative ways to bring evangelism, to do evangelism differently for our particular historical moment? That's what excites me about this program, and working with my colleagues, Janka and Jacqui Lewis. We've known each other for a very long time and deeply respectful of the work both of you have done over the years, and how amazing that we get to share that with you and with others. So, Scott, I think that's a lengthy answer to your pithy question. But.
No, that's exactly what we were going for. So that's good. We're gonna open it up to whatever questions folks have pretty quick here. I thought maybe right before we did that, Jacqui and John, would you be willing to speak just a bit about how you see kind of the format of this cohort when you're thinking about the mentoring components of it, the coursework pieces, folks being in their own ministry context, working on a research project where they're taking their own context into consideration? Just how do you see kind of the life of this cohort moving together over the next couple of years? I know some folks were just wondering if you could speak to what the day in, day out might be like as a part of this program. And then we'll take some questions from the group.
Okay, thanks, Scott. We see the cohort functioning at a couple different levels. First, when we're in face-to-face time, we'll begin by building community. Most of what we want to do in our FaceTime is to model together what it means to be in community, a learning community. And we want also that as we work together in that setting and along the way, one of the things we're asking participants to do is to create in their own setting a group of conversation partners. The purpose of this is that you have a structured way to share back with key constituents in your setting what you're learning. So we're building that into this process. We'll provide protocols for those conversations, but the conversation partners will serve you in a couple of ways. One, you will have the opportunity not only to share back with them what you're reading, what you're discovering from each other, what you're hearing when we're assembled together face to face and in our virtual spaces, to share with them what we're learning, to share back with them resources that you'll be receiving, and invite them to read some things with you while you're doing some reading. And it's our hope that through that process, you begin to open up some new avenues of conversation in your own local setting, inviting people into those times of reflection, but also helping them to consider some of the questions we'll be asking each other. What is our sense of call? How do we understand our prophetic role as a faith community? How do we nurture ourselves spiritually? These kinds of questions, so that they'll come along with you. And they'll then be able to, through those conversations, give you things, questions, concerns, issues they may raise that you can bring back into the cohort. So there's a flow back and forth that way. We'll also be asking you through the reading assignments to write some shorter reflection papers. These might be 3 or 4 pages based on the reading that we'll be asking you to do. Those will be for the purpose of some disciplined reflection, but also provide us opportunity and provide the basis for discussions, either in virtual space or when we are meeting together. There will be a larger paper you'll be asked to write, which will be setting forth your theological frame, collecting together both the conversations we've had together as a cohort, but then also based on some of the reading we'll be asking you to do. And that will be preliminary to the identification of a project that you will do. That will be a more practically focused kind of project, possibly involving and engaging your conversation partners back in their own setting. Some people have asked already, should we come with an idea for a project already in hand? And my response has been, no, we hope that you will allow the project as well as the larger theological frame to result from our time together. You may have some hunches about that, but we hope that your engagement in the course will leave the door open for new discovery and maybe for a focus you didn't anticipate when you first signed on. So that would be a general kind of overview of the flow. We're going to invite you to engage some reading that will be somewhat outside what might be a traditional frame. So this might be engaging some reading that's more in the secular, might be described as originating in a more secular frame, but nonetheless informative for us as we think theologically together. So it'll be, we hope, challenging and exciting and stretching us beyond where we started. So Terry and Jacqui, you want to add to that?
I mean, I think that's really Excellent. I mean, one of the things I wanted to say about the cohort, the cohort and the cohort. I was so lucky when I was working on my PhD at Drew that I was a consultant at the Alban Institute. And so I had this academic peer group, if you will, that were my advisors and that kind of thing. But I also had this practical work group that were clergy and the team at Alban. And I think that's sort of in the back of our mind, that you will have advisors, me, John, Terry, and folks who might bring on. You'll have each other, so that's a learning circle. But also the people in your context. You are a public theologian, and so are they. That's what I think we're doing in congregational life or in ministry life, is we are, in the best case of what we're accomplishing, we're creating theologians everywhere we go. So that you have other folks who will be like rippled out in the world, who are having theologically rigorous thoughts about everything from how ethical when I may do my taxes, or how am I talking to my children about sexual activity, or how am I talking about race and gender in the world. So you create a ripple of theological rigor, I think is exciting to imagine. I think we're so psyched that you get to come to our conference. This year will be our 14th annual conference to dismantle racism through multi-ethnic, multiracial, multicultural congregations. And that means you get faculty like, I don't know, Marianne Williamson, or you get, there we go. We get faculty like Valerie Kaur and Marianne Williamson. And this year it's, there they are, Wajahat Ali, talk about public theologian, Gary Dorian, Schiffer Brosnick, Kelly Brown Douglas. We've been more and more trying to play in the space of both secular philosophers and theologians, and also those who are really in religious communities. So Angel Kyoto Williams, who's this amazing Zen priest, sensei, and Zainab Salbi, who is a Muslim secular activist, humanitarian. So you're going to get another whole level of faculty because we have the conference built into this. And so we're super excited about that. I think the third thing I'd say is you are busy. You are in the practice of ministry. So we're not going to be trying to give you, stuff to do, like stuff to do. But how can every paper we write, how can every project that we do move you toward your final paper, and a project that feels that it helps you go back in the world and do that which you're called to do. So there's three things I'd add.
And I would just thank you for that, both Jacqui and John. And I would add just very briefly that there's a way in which that final Doctor of Ministry project is itself an act of public theology, both in the conception of a project and also in the doing of a project. And we are really open to different ways of exhibiting that, and in terms of how creative can you be? Is it a podcast, right? Is it a work of art? Is it liturgy? Is it something else? So there's a way in which I think that creativity is deeply a part of the way we have conceived of this Doctor of Ministry program, to nurture that creativity, to encourage it, and then to exhibit it through the work projects that we have you do, because we are convinced that and this, any DMin program, I think, worth its salt, has effects within your ministry setting, and we expect that will be true with this Doctor of Ministry program as well.
Thanks so much for that, Terry, Jacqui, and John. I think that's super helpful in terms of just kind of framing what people can expect, not just in terms of what you're going to be reading and talking about, but also just kind of the layout of the cohort as a whole. So I have some questions that some of you submitted ahead of time that I can draw from if folks don't necessarily feel as comfortable shouting them out, but I do know that these are very approachable faculty members that would love to hear you come to voice in this space if you're willing to. So does anyone have a question that they'd be willing to share or kind of bring out to the group you're probably not the only one asking it. Maybe specifically thinking through just what you're hoping to find out about the content, what you're going to be reading, kind of the life of this cohort, things like that. Give it a couple seconds. If not, I know you have questions since you told me what some of them were, but.
I can ask a question.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Mandy.
Mandy.
And I currently serve as music minister in my context. And so I'm really interested in how the arts may be incorporated into the program. I've worshiped at Middle a couple of times and know that is such a important and vital part of that congregation. So I'm hoping and expecting that will play into things a little bit. And I know there's one of the semesters that spoke a little bit about that, but I'd be interested to hear more if there is more.
Yeah, we are really excited, Mandy, that you want to bring that component out. We live in that space a lot at Middle. The conference where you'll have your first in-person gathering is set up to have a couple of salons around arts and worship. And so I'm going to go, there will be worship that's very artsy, and there will be a class about care of the soul that will incorporate arts in that, and then there's a salon on Saturday night with a band and some art. So we've got 3 places for sure that we're holding in the curriculum that weekend. And I'm your guy. John's artsy and so's Terry, but I'm super artsy. So I imagine that each of you will gravitate toward the one of us, or that that gives you the thing you need. So we can think about a project that really speaks to you. And we're going to try to, Terry, you're going to have to help me think about how we put up some recent media that's been happening where we're talking about art at Middle Church in the public square. So I think that you can get diving in, Mandy, before you get here around some of that stuff, and we'll be happy to talk about it. So I hope that's helpful. And you're going to help design your plan the way you need it to be, honey, and write your music and do your thing.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say do your thing. I mean, it's wonderful, Mandy, that you bring a particular focus to your studies. And I think that for some people it will be, say a political issue. I really want to work on immigration.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to understand the incarceration society that we live in, right? How do I work on those things? Mm-hmm. You have said, okay, I have this passion for music, and so we want to support whatever passion you bring to this program, right? And I'm glad you've been to Middle. I can say this. I don't want to embarrass Jacqui by saying this, right? But if you haven't been to Middle, you need to go to Middle, because the remarkable expressions of music and the visual arts, I think, is a stunning example. This is why we've partnered with Middle Church as a kind of lab church for this program, because of the ways in which Middle Church brings arts and music, the visual arts, performance of all kinds, right? And also amazing incursions into public spaces. Through the use
and puppets.
Yeah, exactly. Through the use of the arts, right, to make a statement, to do evangelism in the public square. That's something I think we can all learn from, and it's an integral part of the way we've structured this program.
Is Will Kritzman on the phone? Is Will on the phone? Will, are you there?
I am here.
Hello, Will.
Hello.
I just want to say to Mandy that you have a potential cohort colleague. You want to, encourage him to come. This is a man who is a pastor with an incredible arts background, a theater background, a fundraising for theater background, and some psychodynamic background. So I'm sure there's more of you around this circle that love the arts as well. And I can imagine us playing well together. What do you think, Will?
Oh, I think it's the only way to play together. I think it should be the basis of any sort of creative collaboration.
Good. Just wanted to get your voice on that, buddy.
Thank you.
I'd like to add in that regard. We really, the thing that excites us is that we know that people who are on their way into this program bring enormous gifts of their own. So when we're thinking about creating a learning community, the way Jacqui and I think about that is everybody's who's jumping into this bring enormous experience and gifts and talents to be shared. I mean, we're going to learn, we don't see us as the only people anybody's going to learn from. We're going to learn from each other.
Pablo Freire, people, Pablo Freire.
Right, and we expect that we're going to learn some important things from all of you. So it should be a very creative and open time together.
Who else has a question?
Hi, I'm Ryan. In my context, I work for a denomination. And so rather than spending all of my time or every Sunday in an individual congregation, I'm in a lot of congregations, a lot of different places, but wondering if there is space or energy for kind of outside the traditional congregational context within the program as well.
Yes. Thanks for raising that, Ryan, and it's good to meet you.
Nice to meet you, yeah.
Part of my background has been to have been a regional denominational representative, as I hear you describing your role. So I had, I'm United Methodist, and so I was head of my conference staff for a good number of years, and that put me into many, many different kinds of congregations. In New Jersey, southern part of New Jersey. So will there be opportunities for your perspective to play out in this setting? Absolutely. In fact, you'll not only have the opportunity to look at how all this fits your frame, but you will bring some important things to the conversation as well. So,
which denomination is it, Brian?
I'm with the Presbyterian Church USA.
Yeah.
Presbyterian.
Okay.
Presbyterians unite. I think it's really important for you to know that we're ambitious for this cohort to really have an impact. And I hope there's maybe more of you who are at the denominational level, because I think that's an interesting vantage point, right? For what will congregations do? Right? And what will the systems do that hold the congregations? Yeah. And what will the General Assembly do that holds the systems that holds the congregations? And even though there's a lot of kind of anti-denominational stuff at play in the world, and middle judicatories are, passing, I think there's a lot of, the collegiate church is like a denomination in a way. Right? And I think there's going to be some really wonderful things to play about how you can teach us how to collaborate with our systems. And we've got some examples of what's happening in the collegiate system that we hope we can put on the table as well.
Ryan, I would just add very quickly that we have a number of people already who are already in the cohort, some of whom are in social service organizations, right? So they're not in parish settings, they're not in church settings at all. But that becomes key, because I think key to understanding and doing public theology in our own time, we all know this, right? That is identifying community partners with which we work. The church can't sit alone, right? But identifying community partners is really, really some of the serious work we have to do in public theology. So while I know some Doctor of Ministry programs are focused almost entirely on people who are in parish ministry, that's not the case with this public theology program.
Right. Yeah.
We'll be talking a lot about systems, and systems are both congregations, and the denominations in America is a system. The prison industrial complex is a system, so yeah.
Great. Anybody else got a question they want to throw out there as we kind of move toward the end of our time together, but still plenty of time for questions if you want to throw one out.
Yeah, no, I'm Mike Asiedu from Ghana, and I would like to know that whether you do public theology from the African context.
Ooh, that's good, Mike. That's a great question. I think, in all honesty, you're going to have to help us pull some of that forward. But I just wrote in an anthology of other African diasporan writers a public theology piece, and I was so excited to be invited to do it. I was like, how did they find me? But we did stuff about about infrastructure, about I'm not kidding, about water, about gender, about all of the things in the systems that impact people of African descent around the globe. So I've got that in me. I've been to Ghana. John and I have both been into South Africa, to Namibia, Zambia. So yo soy Africana, and I'd love for you to hold us accountable to that, because I do believe that the so-called, I'm going to say the so-called global South is more and more North. Okay, more and more of the problems, more and more of the issues, the same things that happen in Haiti, Mike, the same things that happen in Ghana, are the same things that happen in Flint, Michigan, that are the same things happen in Texas, the place where the people who don't have power, who are not in control, receive the butt end of so-called charity in the name of God. And in fact, these systems are very much, forgive me everyone for saying so, too often hijacked by theologies that are racist and classist. So you push us, and I promise I'll meet you there, okay? We'll meet you there.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
We're getting to I want to be consistent with the time that I put on our event for those of you, Jacqui made a point earlier, for folks in doctorate of ministry programs, for folks in ministry in general, you probably have come from a day of serving in your context in some capacity. You've probably been loving on your community or invested in your space for a while, so we don't want to keep you on longer than we promised. But I do want to make sure that if someone was really dying to get one last question, then we give them that space before we come to our conclusion and some last minute details related to getting your application done and things. So anyone really wanting to jump in before we finish up?
Can you define for me, or just talk about Jesus as a social? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Ron Sullivan.
Hi, Ron.
Hi there. Can you kind of define for me, or just explain how Jesus as a social activist intersects with public theology?
Oh, can I take that one, guys? Yeah, absolutely. Someone asked me the other day a question like, how does social justice go with Christianity? And I thought, did you read the Gospels? This is an itinerant rabbi who we believe is the Son of God, but an itinerant rabbi in a time of empire, reframing the faith of his ancestors for the context, and not just talking about it, but doing it. So he is never preaching and not healing the sick. He is preaching and healing the sick no matter what their healthcare plan is, right? He is preaching and feeding the hungry no matter what their income level is. He is crossing cultic boundaries to deal with women and children and lepers and tax collectors and the unclean. All of that to me is social activism in his time, and sets the table for all of us who would say we're his disciples to live in the same way. So it's a whole person gospel. He does not leave you blind. He does not leave you deaf. He does not leave you. Want to be made whole. Do you want to be made well? So that's how I would answer that.
Great. Just to follow up, Terry Todd talked about the 3 prongs of the church, and he talked. I'm trying to take some notes real quick, and I just wondered if he could kind of recount. He said one of those prongs was what the church is, and you gave 2 other prongs early on, and I wanted to kind of catch them. One of them was what the church is, and then you talked about 2 other prongs that I just did not catch because I was writing so fast. So could you just kind of go over that? Could you kind of reiterate that?
I'm not sure. I think I was talking so fast and off the cuff. I don't know that I can recreate what I said. I can say this though about the church is, you know, I'm deeply, deeply embedded in the church. I love the church. The church is my life, and I know that if the church doesn't change, if the church doesn't allow the Holy Spirit to move it into new places, right, the church will die.
Right.
And we have seen that happen on local levels again and again and again. But I believe, you know, I'm Pentecostal, right? And so I know, and I know that the Spirit moves, and that a fresh wind is blowing, and that the Spirit is calling us to new places. And new, not only new places, but new ways of being church, new ways of doing church, and that's you know, in traditional theological study, this is called ecclesiology, right? There's a way in which we in this program are going to be thinking together about new ecclesiological models, new ways of being and doing the church, and how and really redefining these lines that have been drawn between church and world that have really not served the mission of Christ at all, in my view. So I think I just gave you 3 more that were not at all related to what
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I could maybe piggyback on some of that, Ron. One of the things I'm aware of is that congregations as systems, and then the larger systems that they're a part of, are under considerable stress. And clergy are expected to be healer, reassure the system that everything's going to be okay. But in practical terms, there are multiple points of stress in these systems. So when we're talking about change, one of the things that we will do along the way in this course is spend some time talking about the dynamics of change. And how do we manage the stress in the process of change? And how do we understand and know how to deal with the conflict that often accompanies change? So we're really focusing on some very practical tools for processes and ways to engage the system to help move it from point A to point B, which is no easy thing. And the clergy sit right in the middle of that, sensing the risks attached to initiating and calling for change, and are not always well equipped to know how to do that. So we'll be talking a fair bit about that as it applies to real issues.
And the church as a catalyst for change?
Yes, exactly.
All right.
And guys, we have so many words because we want you to love us. I'm like, do it, let's do this. So forgive us for having so many words, okay? But I mean, the last word I think I'd want to say is, this is an interdisciplinary program. I mean, I think, you know, history, ecclesiology, pneumatology, Christology, theology, leadership studies, music, art, change management. We want you to get in this time with us and with each other all that we can give you to heal the world through our faith-based institutions. That's what our job is.
Thank you for that, Jacqui. I just want to say thank you to Jacqui, to John, and to Terry for taking time to connect with all of you. I think what was really great about this conversation is it almost gives a taste of what this mentoring component, I think, will be for those that join the cohort. I'll just say, myself, I'm not the only one in this room that's been in school for a very, very long time. And that that component of having relationships with your faculty advisor that take into consideration the difficulties and the conflicts and the joys of ministry in the day in, day out is not normal for every degree program that you would join. In fact, it's pretty unique. So I just want to say, if this was energizing, if the conversations and back and forth energized you for this program, know that I think it will not just be this conversation, it will be this, but even more. And you'll have a chance, I think, to grow not just through the coursework, through curriculum, but through having folks like the faculty in the room and your cohort people helping to form and really mold you in this. And I also just want to say, as a United Methodist, I want to thank Lydia for bringing to our attention, or for those of us who it's already been all over our attention, that the United Methodist Church is going through a hugely important and decisive point in the history and the future of our denomination when it comes to the inclusion and affirmation of LGBTQ clergy and lay people. And I bring it up not only because it's on, I think, a lot of our hearts, but because when I hear some of your questions, those of you that say, I'm in the denominational side, some of the administrative side of leadership. Some of you are saying, I'm a local church pastor in a denomination. Some of you are saying, I'm outside of that. I'm a community developer. I'm wanting to think about evangelism. If we just take this context of the UMC and what it's facing, and what would a public theology witness look like this weekend in all of those different vocations, I think it helps frame a bit of the potential of where this could go. We'll need the folks in the denominational spaces. We'll need the folks in the local churches. We'll need the folks in the neighborhoods, helping us have a more inclusive and loving and justice-filled vision for our LGBTQ neighbors in that particular denominational context. And I understand it's not limited to the UMC. So thank you to Lydia, who is in St. Louis and who is about to face that down in a really unique way. And I just want to thank all of you for bringing such rich questions and conversation this time together.
Scott, is there a way we could provide these folks with our contact information in case they wanted to follow up with other questions?
Yeah. You could do a couple if you want, John. You could type your email in the Zoom chat there, or another way would be John can reach out to me with any contact information that Jacqui, John, and Terry want to share, and I can just email it to everyone that was on this call if that's an easier way to do it.
Jacqui's going to type in my email now.
Okay, perfect. So you'll see there, if you are all in the chat, you'll see my email at the very top, and then you'll see Jacqui, John, and Terry sharing theirs below that. The other thing I just want to make sure you all have, I'm not going to mess up, once they post their email addresses, I'm going to post the link to the application, discover.drew.edu. You can write it down. It's super easy. There's an initial application form. If you have not submitted, it's kind of biographical information. That puts you in our system so that we can track your supplemental items and make sure that you're well on your way to getting everything in. So I would say go to discover.drew.edu, submit that initial form indicating you're applying to the public theology program. If you've already done that, the next step is just making sure whatever supplemental items we're missing, you get to us in time. So if things are behind, transcripts can be weird, institutions can be weird, let me know. I'm a very graceful person. I want to make it work, but it's helpful to have communication if stuff is late, just so I know what I'm waiting. We're not just kind of wondering on that front. So again, I just want to thank you all for joining us. Thanks to Jacqui, to John, to Terry for being here. And in further conversation, reach out to them directly over email or let me know how I can get you to the finish line. So good to see everybody.
Glad to have you join us, guys. Hope you can. Thanks.
Yeah. Take care. Take care, everybody.